The single flickering candle on the tiny cupcake cast a pathetic, dancing shadow against the cavernous marble of our dining room. It was my 30th birthday, a milestone that was supposed to be celebrated with laughter and champagne, with friends and the boisterous, loving chaos of family. Instead, it was just me and Damien, separated by 10 feet of polished mahogany that felt like a continent. He hadn't looked up from his phone in 20 minutes. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the wine fridge and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud. "Damien?" He grunted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his handsome features before they settled back into a mask of digital absorption. "1 second, Ilara. Closing a deal." It was always a deal, a contract, a merger, an entity that demanded more of his passion and attention than I ever could. For 5 years, I had been the perfect millionaire's wife. I hosted his galas, charmed his business partners, and curated our life into a portrait of effortless success. I had decorated this house, turning its cold, modern shell into a warm, breathing home. But lately, I felt like another one of his acquisitions, one that had lost its novelty and was now gathering dust on a shelf. My hand trembled as I rested it on my still flat stomach, a secret sanctuary of hope I had been guarding for weeks. This was my last resort. The ace up my sleeve I prayed would be enough to win him back from the brink of whatever abyss was swallowing him. "I have something to tell you," I said, my voice a whisper. He finally set the phone down, the screen dark, and gave me his full attention. For a fleeting second, I saw the man I fell in love with, the charming, bright-eyed entrepreneur who saw a kindred spirit in a struggling artist. "What is it?" he asked, his tone softening, perhaps sensing the gravity in my own. I took a deep breath, a shaky smile playing on my lips. "We're going to have a baby." The words hung in the air between us. I expected a surge of joy, a whoop of excitement, the closing of that 10-foot distance in a single bound. I expected to be swept into his arms, for the coldness of the past few months to melt away in the heat of this miraculous news. Instead, his face went blank. Not with shock, but with a chilling, hollow emptiness. The warmth in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a look of calculated dread. He stood up, not to come to me, but to pace by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city lights. "A baby," he stated, the words flat, devoid of emotion. "Ilara, we talked about this. The timing is not right." "The timing?" My voice cracked. "Damien, we've been married for 5 years. When would the timing ever be right?" He turned to face me, and the man I loved was gone completely. In his place stood a stranger, his eyes as cold and hard as the glass he stood before. "I've met someone," he said, the sentence delivered like a final, fatal blow. The cupcake, the candle, the cavernous room, it all blurred into a vortex of nausea and disbelief. The secret I held in my womb, my precious beacon of hope, had become the catalyst for my world's complete and utter destruction. My 30th birthday, the day my life truly began, and the day it irrevocably ended. Have you ever felt a deep, gut-wrenching certainty that something beautiful was about to end? The name of the other woman was Amelia. Damien spoke it with a detached reverence that sliced me deeper than any curse word could. She was a colleague, he said, a partner in a new venture. He spoke of her brilliance, her ambition, her understanding of the pressures he faced, each word a thinly veiled comparison, each compliment a stone cast at me. I sat there, frozen, my hand still protectively over my womb, a shield that felt impossibly fragile against the onslaught. "How long?" I finally managed to ask, the words scraping my throat raw. "A few months," he admitted, refusing to meet my eyes. He was still pacing, a caged animal, but the cage was of his own making. "Ilara, I never meant to hurt you," the classic, cowardly line. It was a sentence designed not to soothe the wounded, but to absolve the executioner. It was a plea for his own peace of mind, not for mine. "You never meant to hurt me." I stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. My entire body was vibrating with a cocktail of rage and heartbreak, so potent it threatened to tear me apart. "You stood before my family and friends, Damien. You put this ring on my finger and promised me a lifetime. You built this life with me. And now, when I am carrying your child, you tell me you've met someone? When exactly, in that sequence of events, did you think I wouldn't be hurt?" He had no answer. He just stared out the window, his reflection a ghostly silhouette against the city he had conquered. That city had been our playground, the backdrop to our love story. Now it felt like a silent witness to my humiliation. The next few days were a blur of cold shoulders and whispered phone calls in rooms he thought I couldn't hear. He moved into one of the guest suites, a chasm of unspoken words and shared memories separating our beds. The home I had poured my soul into became a prison. Every object, every photograph, was a testament to a love that was now a lie. My morning sickness was a bitter, constant reminder of the baby that was meant to bind us together, but was now tearing us apart. I found myself clinging to memories, desperate to find the point where it all went wrong. My mind kept returning to a single, perfect day 3 years ago. We were on our second anniversary trip, staying in a rustic villa surrounded by olive groves. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and cypress. Damien had surprised me with a private cooking class. I remember the feel of the flour on my hands, the deep, hearty laugh that escaped him when I accidentally dusted his nose with it. He looked so carefree, so utterly present. Later that afternoon, we sat on a stone terrace overlooking the rolling hills, a bottle of local Chianti between us. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and rose, the colors so vibrant they looked like one of my own paintings. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. "You see all this?" he said, his voice soft, gesturing to the breathtaking landscape. "It's beautiful. But it's just a view. You, Ilara, you're the masterpiece. You bring the color to my life." I had leaned my head on his shoulder, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "I love you, Damien," I whispered. "And I love you," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of wine and sunshine. "Always. Don't you ever forget that." I remembered that promise now, and the memory was a fresh wound. The man who had called me his masterpiece now saw me as a flawed sketch, ready to be discarded. The breaking point came a week after my birthday. I was in the kitchen, trying to force down some toast, when he walked in, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. He placed a thick, leather-bound folder on the granite countertop. "My lawyer drew this up," he said, his tone all business. "It's a separation agreement. It's generous. Generous. He was offering me money to disappear, to take his problem and vanish from his pristine, new life with Amelia." The toast turned to acid in my stomach. "I don't want your money, Damien," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Then what do you want, Ilara?" he snapped, his patience finally wearing thin. "To stay here? To watch me move on? To make this harder than it needs to be?" "I want the man I married," I cried, the tears I had been suppressing finally breaking free. "I want the father of my child to love us. I want the promise you made me in Tuscany." He flinched at the mention of Italy, a flicker of something, guilt, regret, crossing his face before it was gone. "That man is gone," he said, his voice flat. "People change." "No," I said, wiping my tears with the back of my hand, a sudden, cold resolve solidifying in my chest. "You didn't change. You just finally revealed who you truly are, a coward." His jaw tightened. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken resentment. Finally, he delivered the final, crushing blow. "I want you out," he said, the words hanging in the air like poison. "Amelia is moving in at the end of the month. I need you to be gone by then." He was forcing me out of our home, out of our life. Pregnant, heartbroken, and utterly alone, I was being evicted from my own fairy tale. The resolve I felt just moments before crumbled, replaced by a terrifying, all-consuming fear. But beneath the fear, a tiny, resilient ember of defiance began to glow. He could take my home, he could take my heart, but I would not let him take my dignity. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'll leave. But you will live to regret this. You will realize one day that you didn't just lose a wife. You threw away a family." I turned and walked away, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing my complete breakdown. As I packed a small suitcase with trembling hands, I knew this wasn't just an exit. It was an escape. An escape from a man who was a stranger, and from a love that had become a beautiful, suffocating cage. The pain was an ocean, threatening to drown me. But for the sake of the tiny life growing inside me, I had to learn how to swim. Leaving the sleek, minimalist fortress Damien and I had called home felt like shedding a skin. Each step I took down that long, marble hallway was a step away from the woman I had been. The wife, the hostess, the curator of a life that was never truly my own. I didn't take much. A few clothes, my box of paints and brushes, and a framed photo from that day in Tuscany, a relic of a promise I now knew was built on sand. I left the designer clothes, the jewelry, the life of a millionaire's wife behind. They were props for a role I was no longer playing. I drove for an hour with no destination in mind, the city lights blurring through my tears. The weight of my new reality was crushing. I was 30 years old, pregnant, jobless, and homeless. My own family lived across the country, and I was too ashamed to call them to admit the spectacular failure my perfect life had become. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that smelled faintly of bleach and despair. That first night, I didn't sleep. I just lay on the lumpy mattress, my hand on my belly, and let the grief wash over me in waves. I mourned the husband I thought I had, the future I thought we would share, and the family we would never be. Fear was a cold, constant companion. How would I provide for this child? Where would we live? How could I possibly do this alone? The next few days were a study in survival. I lived off vending machine snacks and tried to figure out my next move. I had a degree in graphic design, but I'd let my career go dormant to support Damien's. My portfolio was outdated, my contacts cold. The world felt impossibly large and indifferent. It was on the fourth day, as I was staring at the dregs of my bank account online, that my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. My heart leaped, a foolish, traitorous part of me hoping it was Damien, filled with remorse. But it wasn't. "Elara, it's Beatrice." The voice was crisp, formal, and instantly recognizable. Beatrice Delacroix, Damien's mother, my mother-in-law. A woman as formidable and elegant as her ancestral name. In all my years with Damien, our interactions had been pleasant but distant. She was polite, impeccably dressed, and always held a certain reserve, as if she were appraising me, waiting to see if I was worthy of the family name. I always felt she saw me as a pretty, artistic diversion for her son, not a permanent fixture. I braced myself for a lecture, for a defense of her son's deplorable behavior. "Beatrice," I said, my voice hoarse. "Where are you?" she asked, her tone direct, cutting through any pretense. I'm fine," I lied. "Don't lie to me, Alara. I know my son. He is a brilliant man, but he has a streak of recklessness, a profound selfishness that I had hoped you had cured him of. I was wrong. Now, tell me where you are." There was no pity in her voice, but there was something else. A current of steel, of command. I found myself telling her everything: the motel, the fear, the pregnancy. I spoke without tears, my voice flat with exhaustion. She was silent for a long moment when I finished. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing on the other end. "Pack your things," she said finally. "I am sending a car. It will be there in 30 minutes. "A car? Where are you taking me?" "Home," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And then she hung up. True to her word, a sleek, black town car pulled up to my dingy motel room exactly 30 minutes later. The driver, a kind-faced man named Arthur, who had worked for the Delacroix family for decades, loaded my single suitcase and box of paints into the trunk without a word. We didn't drive towards the city, towards the penthouse I had shared with Damien. Instead, we headed east, towards the old, moneyed suburbs, where sprawling estates hid behind stone walls and ancient oak trees. We pulled up to a magnificent, ivy-covered Georgian mansion, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time. This was the Delacroix ancestral home, the house where Damien had grown up, a place I had only visited a handful of times for stiff holiday dinners. Beatrice was waiting for me at the door, standing tall and regal in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. There were no airs, no grand pronouncements. She simply looked at me, her sharp blue eyes, the same eyes her son possessed, but hers held a wisdom his lacked, softening with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "You look exhausted, child," she said, her voice softer now. "Come in. You're safe here." She led me through a grand foyer, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and into a warm, sun-drenched library filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable, worn leather armchairs. A fire crackled in the hearth. She motioned for me to sit and poured 2 cups of tea from a silver service. "I will not make excuses for my son," she began, handing me a cup. "What he has done is unforgivable. It is a stain on our family's honor. He has chosen his path, and in doing so, he has abdicated his responsibility." I just nodded, unsure of what to say. "That child you are carrying," she continued, her gaze direct and unwavering, "is a Delacroix. He may not want to be its father, but I will be its grandmother, and you, Alara, are its mother. That makes you family. In fact, that makes you more family than he is at this moment." She stood and walked over to a heavy oak desk, retrieving a set of keys and a thick vellum envelope sealed with wax. She placed them on the table in front of me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "These are the keys to this house," she said simply. "And this," she tapped the envelope, "is the deed. I had my lawyer draw it up this morning. I am signing the title of the house over to you and to my grandchild. This is your home now." I stared at her, dumbfounded. The sheer magnitude of the gesture was incomprehensible. "Beatrice, I can't accept this. This is your home. This house needs life in it." she said, a sad smile touching her lips. It needs the sound of laughter again. It needs the pitter-patter of little feet. My husband is gone. My son has abandoned his legacy. This house, this legacy, it belongs to the future now. It belongs to you and that baby. She placed her cool, dry hand over mine. He left you with nothing. I am giving you everything. Let him have his glass tower in the city with his fleeting affair. You will have a foundation. You will have roots. You will have a home. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in weeks, they were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible gratitude. A woman I barely knew, a woman I had always found intimidating, had just thrown me the most incredible lifeline. In the wreckage of my old life, she had single-handedly laid the foundation for a new one. She had not just given me a mansion. She had given me a sanctuary, a future, and a fighting chance. Living in the Delacroix mansion was like stepping into another century. The air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and roses from the sprawling gardens. The silence was different from the tense, heavy silence of the penthouse. Here, it was a peaceful, breathing silence, filled with the ticking of grandfather clocks and the distant song of birds. For the first few weeks, I felt like a ghost haunting its grand halls, overwhelmed by Beatrice's monumental act of faith and terrified I would somehow prove unworthy of it. Beatrice, however, gave me no time to wallow. She was a woman of action, not sentiment. She seemed to understand that the best cure for a broken heart was purpose. That guest wing at the east end of the house has been neglected for years, she announced one morning over breakfast. The light in there is wonderful. You're an artist, Elara. Make it your own. Turn it into your studio. Give it life again. It was a brilliant suggestion. It was a project, a focus, something to pour my anxious energy into, besides the well-being of my growing baby. I spent my days covered in dust and paint. I tore up old, musty carpets to reveal beautiful hardwood floors. I painted the walls in warm, creamy whites and soft blues, colors that felt like hope. Arthur, the kind driver, would help me move heavy furniture, never asking questions, always with a quiet, encouraging smile. Slowly, painstakingly, I was not just renovating a wing of a house. I was rebuilding myself. Each stroke of the paintbrush was an act of defiance. Each design choice was a declaration of my own identity, separate from Damien. This wasn't his sleek, cold aesthetic. It was mine. It was warm and a little bohemian, and filled with light. As my belly swelled, so did my confidence. I unearthed my old portfolio, and cringing, began to update it with new designs, sketches, and concepts I'd created in the quiet evenings. Beatrice would often come and sit with me in the new studio, watching me work, a cup of herbal tea in her hand. Our relationship bloomed in that sunlit room. She was no longer just Damien's mother. She became my mentor, my confidant, my friend. She told me stories of her own life, of marrying into the powerful Delacroix family, of the loneliness she felt, of the struggles she faced, raising a headstrong son after her husband passed away. He was always like this, she confided one afternoon, looking at a half-finished watercolor I was painting of the rose garden. Brilliant, charming, but with a hollow space inside him. Always chasing the next thrill, the next conquest. I think, in his own way, he truly loved you, Elara. But he doesn't know how to love what is good and steady. He only knows how to conquer. And once you were conquered, he grew restless. Her words didn't excuse his actions, but they offered a sliver of understanding that eased a small part of my pain. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that he was too broken to accept what I offered. With Beatrice's encouragement, I started a small, freelance graphic design business from my new studio. I reached out to an old colleague from before my marriage, and to my surprise, she had a project for me, designing a logo for a new local bakery. The pay was modest, a pittance compared to the allowance Damien used to give me. But when that first check arrived, addressed to Ilara Vance, my maiden name, I held it in my hand and cried. It was the first money I had earned for myself in over 5 years. It was proof of my independence. It was mine. Small wins became my lifeline. The first successful client, finishing the nursery, a beautiful, serene room painted with murals of gentle animals and starry skies, feeling the baby's first powerful kick as Beatrice and I assembled the crib. We weren't just a pregnant woman and her mother-in-law. We were a team, building a nest for this new life. I sometimes heard snippets about Damien and Amelia from Beatrice, who still had her sources in the city. Their glamorous life was apparently not as idyllic as I imagined. There were reports of public arguments, of Amelia's frustration with Damien's workaholism, of the hollowness of a relationship built on the ruins of another. I took no pleasure in this, but it did serve as a quiet, steady confirmation. I had not lost a prize. I had escaped a disaster. One evening, as I stood in the finished nursery, looking at the tiny clothes we had folded and the mobile of felt stars hanging over the crib, Beatrice came and stood beside me. "You've done a beautiful job, Ilara," she said softly. "We've done a beautiful job," I corrected her, smiling. She placed a hand on my arm, her expression serious. "I want you to understand something. This house, this support, it does not come with strings. I am not buying your loyalty. When this baby is born, you are free. You can stay here for the rest of your life, or you can take your child and build a new life elsewhere. You owe me nothing. Your only duty is to that baby, and to your own happiness." It was the greatest gift she could have given me. Not the mansion, not the money, but the freedom. The permission to be my own person, to make my own choices, to build a future on my own terms. As I stood there, 8 months pregnant, surrounded by the quiet strength of the home I had built and the unwavering support of the woman who had become my family, I realized I was no longer the broken, terrified woman who had checked into a motel 6 months ago. I was strong. I was a survivor. And I was ready to be a mother. The day Damien returned was a Tuesday in early autumn. The leaves on the ancient oaks had begun to turn, painting the grounds in fiery shades of crimson and gold. I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a website design for a new client, the afternoon sun streaming through the large windows. I was 9 months pregnant, a week past my due date, and felt as large and serene as a planet orbiting the sun of my impending motherhood. Arthur appeared at the door, his expression troubled. "Mum," he said, his voice low. "There's someone here to see you. It's Mr. Damien." My heart didn't leap. It didn't sink. It just gave a steady, solid thud. I placed my hand on my belly, a gesture that was now second nature, a silent communication with my child. "We're okay. We're safe." "It's all right, Arthur," I said, my voice calm. "Show him in." He walked into my studio, and the change in him was jarring. The impeccably tailored suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a rumpled shirt. The confident, arrogant swagger had vanished. He looked tired, gaunt, and profoundly lost. His eyes, those same sharp blue eyes as his mother's, darted around the room, my room, taking in the vibrant paintings, the organized chaos of my work, the sheer life that pulsed within its walls. Then his gaze fell on my belly, and a look of such profound, gut-wrenching anguish crossed his face that I almost felt a pang of pity for him. "Elara," he breathed, his voice raspy. "Damien," I replied, my tone even. I didn't stand. I stayed seated in my chair, the queen in her own small, self-made kingdom. He took a hesitant step forward. "You look beautiful." "I'm pregnant," I stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. It tends to have that effect. He flinched. Can we talk?" "We are talking." He raked a hand through his unkempt hair, the picture of a man unraveling. "It's over," he said. "With Amelia. It's been over for a while. It was a mistake. A catastrophic, life-ruining mistake." He began to pace, just as he had on that awful birthday night. But now his movements were agitated, desperate. "It wasn't real, Elara. None of it. It was a fantasy, an escape. I was suffocating under the pressure of the business, of everything, and I was a fool. I thought she was the answer, but she was just another transaction. All we did was fight. She hated that I worked so much. She wasn't you. No one is you." He stopped in front of my desk, his eyes pleading. "I've been in hell, a hell of my own making. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I feel is this crushing weight of what I've done. I lost everything. I lost my home, my wife, my family." His voice broke. "I lost my child before I even had a chance to know them." He finally looked me in the eye, and I saw tears welling up. They were real. This wasn't the cold stranger who had evicted me. This was a broken man, drowning in the consequences of his own actions. "I am so sorry, Elara," he whispered, the words raw and full of pain. "That's not enough. I know it's not. But it's all I have. I was cruel and selfish and unforgivably blind. I threw away the only real, beautiful thing in my life for an illusion. I'm sorry I destroyed our family. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you deserved." He gestured around the room. "My mother told me what she did. She gave you the house. And you've made it a home again. Something I never could." His eyes fell on the door to the adjoining room, the nursery. He took a step towards it, then stopped, as if held back by an invisible wall. "Can I?" I gave a slight nod. He pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. I heard a sharp intake of breath. I knew what he was seeing: the soft colors, the mural of the starry sky, the tiny clothes, the empty crib waiting expectantly. He was seeing the tangible, fully realized evidence of the life he had so casually discarded. He stayed in there for a long time. When he came out, his face was wet with tears. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's too much to ask. But I am asking. I am begging for a second chance. Let me come home. Let me be a father to our child. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll sell the company. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please, Elara, don't make me live without you." He stood before me, stripped of all his power and wealth, offering me his broken heart. And in that moment, I felt the last vestiges of my anger and resentment dissolve, replaced by a calm, quiet clarity. I took a deep breath. "The Elara you're asking for, Damien, she doesn't exist anymore," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You broke her, and I had to pick up her pieces and build someone new. This woman," I gestured to myself, to my belly, to my studio, "is not your wife. She is a mother, and her first, last, and only priority is the peace and stability of her child." I stood up, my body heavy but my spirit light. I believe your apology is sincere, and for my own peace, I accept it. I forgive you. But forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can't unshatter a mirror. You said you threw away the only real thing in your life. You're right, you did. And you have to learn to live with that. But I can't go back. I can't risk this peace, this life that I have built from the ashes of what you burned down. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He nodded slowly, a man accepting his sentence. Can I be a part of the baby's life? He asked, his voice small. As a father. That is a bridge we will cross when we come to it, I said. It is a right you will have to earn, not one you are entitled to. You can start by getting yourself healthy. For real this time. Not for me. For yourself. And for the child you hope to know one day. He looked at me. A long, searching gaze, as if memorizing the face of the woman he had lost. I understand, he whispered. He turned and walked out of the studio, out of the house, and out of my life, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the autumn afternoon. I walked to the window and watched his car disappear down the long, tree-lined drive. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a profound, quiet sadness for the man he could have been, and a deep, unwavering peace for the woman I had become. I placed my hand on my belly, where a sudden, strong contraction tightened in response. It was time. My new life was about to begin. My daughter was born just as the sun was rising the next day, painting the sky in the same soft, hopeful hues I had used for her nursery walls. We named her Lily Beatrice Vance. Lily for new beginnings and the purity of a love that was all my own. Beatrice for the woman who had become my rock, my family, my savior. And Vance for the woman who had found her own strength. Holding her in my arms for the first time was not a cinematic explosion of feeling, but a quiet, profound settling. It was the feeling of a missing piece of my soul clicking into place. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, her small, perfect face a testament to a future that was mine to shape. Life settled into a new rhythm, dictated by feedings, lullabies, and the boundless love I felt for my daughter. The mansion, once a symbol of inherited power and old money, transformed into a warm, sprawling playground for one tiny, gurgling queen. Beatrice was a doting, hands-on grandmother, her formal reserve melting away completely in the face of Lily's innocent charm. Our family was small and unconventional, a new mother, a grandmother, and a baby girl. But it was whole. It was built not on vows or contracts, but on a foundation of fierce, unconditional love and mutual respect. My freelance business thrived. My work, now infused with the purpose of providing for my daughter, took on a new depth and creativity. I hired another designer to help with the workload. I was no longer just surviving. I was flourishing. Damien kept his distance. True to his word, he began the hard work of fixing himself. Beatrice would receive quiet updates from his therapist. He sold a majority stake in his company, stepping back from the high-pressure world that had consumed him. He sent gifts for Lily, but always through his mother, respecting the boundary I had set. There were no more pleas, no more dramatic returns. Only a quiet, consistent effort to become a man worthy of being a father. About a year later, on a bright spring afternoon, I was in the garden with Lily, who was taking wobbly, triumphant first steps on the soft grass. Beatrice came out to join us, a letter in her hand. "It's from Damien," she said. "He wants to know if he can see her. He suggests a public place, a park, for an hour. He says he will understand if the answer is no." I looked down at my daughter. her face alight with the joy of her newfound mobility. She was secure, she was happy, she was so deeply loved. She deserved to know her father, but she also deserved to be protected. I looked at Beatrice, my partner in this journey, and saw the question in her eyes. I had the power to say no, to keep that door closed forever. But looking at Lily, I knew that true strength wasn't about building walls, but about having the courage to build bridges carefully and on your own terms. "Tell him yes," I said, a sense of peace settling over me. "Tell him we'll meet him at the Botanical Gardens on Sunday." That Sunday, I saw Damien for the first time in over a year. He looked healthier, calmer. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. He didn't try to hug me or overstep. He just looked at Lily with an expression of pure wonder and regret. He had brought her a small, soft, stuffed bear. He sat on the grass, a few feet away, and simply watched her play, his eyes full of a gentle, heart-breaking love. I didn't know what the future held for us, if he would ever be more than a weekend visitor in our daughter's life. But I knew that I had made the right choice. My life wasn't a fairy tale that had ended in heartbreak. It was a real, complicated, beautiful story of a woman who had lost everything she thought she wanted, only to find everything she truly needed. Sometimes, life gives us storms not to destroy us, but to wash away what no longer serves us, clearing the path for a love that can truly grow. I had found that love, not in a millionaire's penthouse, but in a baby's smile, a grandmother's wisdom, and the quiet, unshakable strength I finally found within myself. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever had to find strength in the middle of a storm, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and comment below with your own story of resilience. You are stronger than you know. What happens when a billionaire's cruel joke backfires in the most spectacular way imaginable? In the glittering heart of New York City, a single stain of red wine on a $1,000 suit ignites a firestorm of public humiliation. For Sebastian Sterling, the city's most arrogant tech mogul, it was a chance to make an example of a clumsy waitress. He offered her a challenge meant to break her, a mocking proposal in front of the city's elite, dance a perfect tango, and he would marry her. He expected tears. He expected failure. He never expected that the woman in the cheap apron was a queen in exile, and he had just handed her the keys to his kingdom and his heart. The air in the Serafina was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a place where conversations were conducted in hushed, confident tones, and the clinking of Cristofler's silverware against Bernardeau porcelain was the evening's primary soundtrack. For Celestine Rossi, it was just another Tuesday, another 12-hour shift on her feet, another night of smiling through the ache in her calves and the deeper ache in her soul. Her uniform, a starched black dress with a crisp white apron, felt like a costume from a life she was never meant to lead. It was neat, it was clean, but it was a cage. She moved between tables with a practiced grace, her steps economical and silent, a ghost refilling water glasses and clearing away the remnants of exorbitant meals. Her face was a mask of pleasant neutrality. Her dark eyes, which once held the fire of 1,000 spotlights, now carefully guarded and observant. Tonight, table 12 was the center of the restaurant's universe. It was occupied by Sebastian Sterling and his entourage. Even if you didn't read the business pages, you knew him. His face was plastered on magazine covers and digital billboards across the city. The self-made titan of Sterling innovations. A man who had disrupted the tech world with a blend of brutal genius and even more brutal ambition. He was handsome in a severe way, with sharp cheekbones, piercing grey eyes, and dark hair meticulously styled to look effortlessly windswept. He radiated an aura of impatience, as if the rest of the world was operating on a delay he couldn't afford. With him was his fiancée, Victoria Davenport, the daughter of an old-money real estate dynasty. She was everything Celestine was not: poised blonde and adorned in diamonds that glittered with cold ancestral light. She sipped her champagne and laughed a laugh that never quite reached her eyes. Celestine approached the table with a heavy bottle of Chateau Margaux, a wine that cost more than her monthly rent. Her mind was 1,000,000 miles away, calculating the copay for her father's next round of physical therapy, wondering if she could pick up an extra shift on Thursday. That momentary distraction was all it took. A busboy, young and nervous, pivoted too quickly behind her. Their shoulders brushed a minor collision in the grand scheme of things. But the angle was disastrous. Celestine's hand, steady for thousands of hours of service, faltered. The neck of the bottle tipped, and a splash of deep blood-red wine arched through the air, landing directly on the pristine white shirt and grey silk tie of Sebastian Sterling. The world stopped. The hushed chatter of the restaurant died instantly. Every eye swiveled to table 12. The silence was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Victoria Davenport gasped, a hand flying to her mouth in performative shock. "Oh my God!" Celestine felt the blood drain from her face. "Mr. Sterling, I am so incredibly sorry." She began, her voice trembling slightly as she reached for a napkin. Sebastian looked down at the crimson stain spreading across his chest like a fatal wound. He didn't move. He simply stared at it for a long, terrible moment. Then very slowly, he lifted his gaze to Celestine. His eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were cold, analytical, and filled with a profound, dismissive contempt. "Are you?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Are you sorry for your incompetence, or just for the fact that you've likely just ended your employment?" "It was an accident," Celestine whispered, her cheeks burning with shame. "The busboy, do not deflect blame." He cut her off, his voice rising just enough to carry. "A professional anticipates their surroundings. This shirt is custom-made. This tie is from Milan. Their value exceeds your annual salary. But the true cost is the disruption to my evening, an evening for which I am paying a small fortune." He stood up, dabbing at the stain with a napkin in a way that only made it worse. His friends, a pack of sycophantic junior partners and investors, watched with a mixture of pity for her and admiration for his display of power. "Please, sir." The restaurant manager, a flustered man named Mr. Dubois, scurried over. "The meal is on the house, of course. We will cover all dry cleaning expenses, all of them." Sebastian waved a dismissive hand, never taking his eyes off Celestine. She stood frozen, the heavy wine bottle still in her hand, feeling smaller and more insignificant than she ever had in her life. This was the nadir, the absolute bottom. The years of sacrifice, of swallowing her pride to pay for her father's care. All of it had led to this moment of public crucifixion over a spilled drink. "It's not about the money, Dubois," Sebastian said, a cruel smirk beginning to form on his lips. "It's about the principle. It's about standards." He looked at Celestine from her worn-out black shoes to the stray wisp of dark hair that had escaped her tight bun. He saw a nobody, a clumsy, forgettable waitress in a city full of them. And in that moment, fueled by arrogance and the rapt attention of the room, he decided to turn her humiliation into his evening's entertainment. "You know," he said, his voice now theatrical, "I'm in a generous mood. I'm willing to overlook this catastrophic failure of motor skills on one condition." Every person in the room leaned in. Celestine just wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She could feel the stares, the whispers, the judgment. Sebastian's eyes drifted to the small, polished wooden square in the corner of the restaurant, a makeshift dance floor where a jazz trio was playing a quiet, melancholic tune. A wicked, brilliant idea sparked in his mind. It was perfect. It was condescending. It was utterly unforgettable. He turned back to Celestine, his smirk widening into a predatory grin. "I'm sure you're a woman of many hidden talents. Let's see one of them." Celestine just stared, confused and terrified. "Sir." "Don't be shy," he purred, the mockery dripping from every syllable. "A little performance, a little dance for our supper. What do you say?" He was toying with her, and everyone knew it. He was and she was the mouse he had cornered, and he was determined to enjoy the kill. The jazz trio, sensing a shift in the room's atmosphere, trailed off into a confused silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the frantic beating of Celestine's own heart. Sebastian Sterling circled her slowly like a shark, inspecting its prey. "A dance," he repeated, savoring the words. "A simple dance, to prove you're more than just a pair of hands that can't hold a wine bottle." Victoria Davenport let out a little titter of laughter, which was echoed by the men at their table. "Oh, Sebastian, you're dreadful," she said, though her eyes shone with cruel amusement. Mr. Dubois looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. "Mr. Sterling, please, this is highly unorthodox. The young lady is being given a chance to redeem herself." Sebastian cut in smoothly, his gaze locked on Celestine. "A chance most people in her position only dream of. The undivided attention of everyone in this room." Celestine's throat was dry. She wanted to say no. She wanted to throw the wine bottle at his perfectly sculpted head, tear off her apron, and walk out with her head held high. But the image of her father flashed in her mind, his quiet strength, the way his medical bills piled up on the kitchen table, the hope in his eyes that she'd tried so hard not to extinguish. She needed this job. She couldn't afford a grand gesture of defiance. Her pride had been a luxury she'd surrendered long ago. I don't dance, sir." She mumbled the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. Sebastian laughed, a sharp, barking sound devoid of humor. "Oh, I'm sure you can manage a little shuffle. Everyone can." He gestured to the dance floor. "But let's not make it too easy." His eyes scanned the room, and a glint of inspiration, or perhaps malevolence, lit them up. He walked over to the jazz trio's abandoned speaker, pulled out his phone, and connected it to the Bluetooth system with the ease of a man who owned the world and all the technology in it. He scrolled for a moment, a thoughtful, predatory look on his face. Then he found what he was looking for. The opening notes that filled the silent restaurant were unmistakable. Not the gentle swing of the jazz trio, but the dramatic, heart-wrenching soulb of a bandoneon. It was the sound of Buenos Aires, of late-night milongas, of passion and despair. It was tango, and not just any tango. It was La Comparsita, in its most complex and dramatic orchestral arrangement. The tango of tangos, a dance that professionals spent a lifetime attempting to master. Celestine froze. The music was a ghost, a phantom limb she hadn't felt in years. Each note was a memory, a scar. The scent of her partner's cologne, the feel of the hardwood floor beneath her worn tango shoes, the weight of a gold medal around her neck, the crushing disappointment of a dream destroyed. It all came rushing back, a tidal wave of pain and longing. Sebastian walked back to her, his phone held aloft like a scepter. His voice was a triumphant, mocking roar that filled the cavernous room. "There," he declared, "a proper challenge. The tango. A dance of passion, precision, and control. Qualities you seem to be lacking." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still audible to the nearest tables. "I'll tell you what. I'll make you a proposition, a truly once-in-a-lifetime offer." He straightened up, ensuring he had everyone's attention. He was a showman, a ringmaster in his own private circus of cruelty. "Forget the dry cleaning bill. Forget your job," he announced grandly. "You dance this tango right here, right now, and you dance it perfectly. And I'll do more than forgive you." He paused for dramatic effect, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "I'll marry you." The room erupted, not in gasps of shock, but in peals of laughter. It was the most absurd, most insulting, most theatrical proposition imaginable. The billionaire and the waitress. A fairy tale twisted into a public mockery. Victoria laughed, the hardest dabbing at her eyes, as if he'd just told the cleverest joke in the world. "Marry me." Celestine finally found her voice, a whisper of disbelief. "A figure of speech, of course," Sebastian said, with a condescending wink to his friends. "A grand prize for a grand performance. But let's be realistic. There is no one in this city, let alone this room, let alone in that uniform, who could do justice to that music. It's an impossible task." He crossed his arms, the picture of smug satisfaction. The challenge was laid. The humiliation was complete. He expected her to crumble, to burst into tears and flee the room, providing the perfect end to his little power play. He had boxed her in, stripped her of her dignity, and made her the punchline of a joke she would never forget. For a long moment, Celestine stood motionless. The music swirled around her, a lament of strings and the rhythmic pulse of the piano. The laughter of the crowd echoed in her ears. She looked at Sebastian Sterling's mocking face, at Victoria's smug superiority, at the sea of expectant eyes, all waiting for her to break. Something inside her, a pilot light she thought had been extinguished years ago, flickered. It grew into a small, hot flame. It wasn't pride she felt, not anymore. It was rage. A pure, cold, clarifying rage. He thought this music was his weapon to humiliate her. He had no idea it was her sword and shield. He thought he was the ringmaster, but he had just walked into her arena. She looked directly into Sebastian's cold grey eyes. The fear and shame in her own had vanished, replaced by an intensity that made him momentarily falter. Slowly, deliberately, she began to untie the strings of her apron. "Fine," she said, her voice no longer a whisper, but clear and steady, cutting through the lingering laughter. She folded the apron neatly and placed it on a nearby tray. Then she kicked off her sensible, comfortable work shoes. The soft thud they made on the carpet was like a declaration. She stood before him in her simple black dress and stockinged feet. The posture of the weary waitress was gone. Her shoulders went back, her spine straightened, her chin lifted. In the space of 10 seconds, Celestine Rossi vanished, and someone else, someone formidable and terrifyingly alive, took her place. "You want a tango?" she said, her voice now laced with ice. "You'll get a tango, but you're going to be my partner." Sebastian's smirk wavered, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise. This was not part of the script. It's a partner dance," she stated, not asked. She held out a hand, her gesture an undeniable command. "Unless you're afraid," the entire restaurant held its breath. The challenge had been thrown back. The mouse was roaring at the lion. To refuse now would be to admit defeat, to show weakness in front of the very people he sought to impress. Trapped by his own hubris, Sebastian Sterling had no choice. With a look of stunned disbelief, he took her hand. The moment his fingers touched hers, a jolt like an electric current passed between them. Her hand was not the soft, timid thing he expected. It was strong, confident, and impossibly sure. Celestine pulled him not gently toward the polished wooden floor. She turned to the band leader. "Restart the track," she commanded, "from the top." The first mournful notes of La Comparsita filled the room again. But this time the silence wasn't born of shock. It was electric with anticipation. As Celestine led Sebastian to the center of the floor, a transformation occurred that was so profound it seemed like a trick of the light. The slouch of the waitress, born from hours of fatigue, vanished. Her spine became a rod of steel, her shoulders set in a posture of regal command. She lifted her chin, and the guarded, weary look in her eyes was replaced by a smoldering fire. The simple black work dress no longer looked like a uniform. It looked like a deliberate, minimalist costume, accentuating the clean, powerful lines of her body. Sebastian, accustomed to leading in every aspect of his life, found the dynamic instantly and shockingly reversed. Her grip on his hand and her hand on his back were not suggestions. They were instructions, written in a language his body understood before his mind could process it. He was a competent social dancer, taught the requisite steps for charity balls and high society functions. He knew how to lead a waltz, how to navigate a foxtrot. He knew nothing of this. This was not a dance. It was a declaration of war. For the opening bars, she held them in the abrazo, the traditional tango embrace, but hers was different. It was firm, dominant. She held his gaze, and in her dark eyes, he saw not a waitress, but a predator. He saw a story he couldn't begin to read. Then she moved. It began with the caminata, the tango walk. But her walk was not a simple step. It was a panther's prowl, her feet brushing the floor with a deadly grace, her hips swaying with a controlled hypnotic rhythm. She guided him backward, forcing him to follow her lead, his mind reeling. He had intended to embarrass her. Instead, he was a puppet, and she was the master pulling his strings. As the music swelled, her movements grew more complex. She executed a flawless ocho, her legs scissoring through the air with a speed and precision that defied belief. Her body was a blur of controlled energy, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. She wasn't just performing steps. She was interpreting the music, embodying the soul of the tango, its passion, its melancholy, its fierce, defiant pride. The crowd was mesmerized. The whispers had stopped. The smirks had been wiped from every face, replaced by slack-jawed awe. Victoria Davenport's smile was frozen, a brittle mask of disbelief. This was not possible. The clumsy girl who had spilled wine was dancing with the skill of a world-class professional. Celestine pulled Sebastian into a series of giros, spinning him around her as she remained the unshakable axis of their shared world. He struggled to keep up his social dancing skills, utterly inadequate for the storm he had unleashed. She was the one leading her subtle shifts in weight and pressure, communicating her intent a fraction of a second before she moved. She was 10 steps ahead of him, anticipating his every clumsy reaction and incorporating it into her choreography. At one point, in a breathtaking display of audacity, she dipped him. It was a shocking reversal of roles, a move of such dominance that a collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. She held him there, suspended inches from the floor. For a heart-stopping second, her leg wrapped around his in a perfect gancho. She stared down at him, and in that moment, he felt utterly powerless. He saw the culmination of thousands of hours of practice, of sweat, of tears, of a life he couldn't possibly comprehend. She was telling him without words, "You have no idea who I am." He was no longer Sebastian Sterling, the tech mogul. He was just a man completely out of his depth, held captive by a force of nature disguised as a waitress. He felt the heat of her body, smelled the faint scent of soap and starch, and saw the raw, untamed passion burning in her eyes. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. For the climax of the song, she broke their embrace, giving herself space. The floor became her stage. She performed a series of solo footwork combinations, her feet a blur of staccato taps and elegant sweeps, lapisbolio barrida. It was a language of its own, a story of a broken heart and an unbreakable spirit. The audience was no longer watching a dance. They were witnessing a soul laid bare. For the final crashing chord of the music, she launched herself back toward him. He braced himself, but instead of a collision, she melted into his arms, finishing in a dramatic pose. Her back arched her head, thrown back, one hand pressed against her heart. Her chest heaved with exertion, and her eyes, glittering with unshed tears and fiery defiance, were locked on his. For 3 eternal seconds, the restaurant was utterly silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then a single person began to clap, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire room, from the busboys hiding in the kitchen doorway to the wealthiest patrons, was on its feet, erupting in a deafening roar of applause and shouts of "Brava!" It was an ovation the Serafina had never seen. It wasn't polite society applause. It was thunderous, visceral, and raw. Sebastian stood, frozen, his arms still around Celestine, his mind a complete blank. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the woman in his arms. The humiliation he had planned had turned into his own public humbling. He had mocked a master, challenged a queen in her own court, and he had been utterly, devastatingly defeated. Celestine gently extricated herself from his grasp. She ignored the applause, the shocked faces, the standing ovation. She gave one last, long look at Sebastian Sterling, a look that held a universe of meaning, contempt, triumph, pity, and a profound, heartbreaking sadness. Then, without a word, she turned her back on him on table 12, on the entourage stunned restaurant. She walked past the gawking Mr. Dubois, retrieved her worn shoes, and headed for the staff exit, never once looking back. She didn't need their applause. She didn't need his ridiculous proposal. She had taken back the only thing that mattered. She had taken back herself. The thunderous applause slowly faded as Celestine disappeared through the swinging kitchen doors, leaving a vacuum in the center of the room. The patrons slowly returned to their seats, but the atmosphere of quiet elegance was shattered. The air buzzed with excited, incredulous chatter. Everyone was talking about the waitress, the tango waitress. Sebastian Sterling remained standing on the dance floor, the wine stain on his shirt, a forgotten detail. He felt as though he'd been struck by lightning. The ghost of her touch, the intensity of her gaze, the sheer raw power of her performance, it replayed in his mind on a loop. Who was she? How was this possible? Sebastian, for God's sake, come and sit down. Everyone is staring. Victoria's voice was a sharp, icy hiss that cut through his daze. He looked over at her. Her face was a mask of fury. The amusement was gone, replaced by a deep personal humiliation. She hadn't been entertained. She had been upstaged. A nobody waitress had stolen the spotlight at her table with her fiancé and had become the star of an evening that was supposed to be about them. "Did you see that?" one of his associates, a man named Richard, said with a low whistle. "Where did she learn to dance like that?" "She must be a professional," another chimed in. "Some sort of performance artist." Sebastian ignored them. He walked back to the table, his movements stiff and robotic. He felt exposed, foolish. His clever, cruel game had blown up in his face in the most public way imaginable. He had tried to assert his power and had only succeeded in revealing hers. "That was quite a spectacle," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I hope you're satisfied." Sebastian started, but he had no words. Satisfied. He was disoriented, shaken, and inexplicably intrigued. The spell was broken by the frantic tapping of a phone screen at a nearby table. A woman was excitedly showing her friend a video. "I got the whole thing. I'm posting it right now. #Tango Waitress, #Serafina, Showdown." A knot of dread tightened in Sebastian's stomach. By the time he and his silent, furious fiancée were in their car, his phone was already buzzing incessantly. A news alert from a city gossip blog popped up. "Mysterious waitress stuns elite crowd with world-class tango at the Serafina." He clicked on it. The video was shaky, filmed from a table across the room, but it was unmistakably clear. The quality was poor, but the quality of the dancing was undeniable. It captured everything: his mocking challenge, her quiet acceptance, and the breathtaking 3-minute performance that had left everyone speechless. The comments were already flooding in. "OMG, who is she? She's incredible. That arrogant jerk in the suit is Sebastian Sterling. He deserved that. She didn't just dance. She owned him. I hope she sues him for harassment. That 'marry you' comment was disgusting. #find the tango waitress." The hashtag was spreading like wildfire. "This is a disaster," Victoria said from the other side of the car, her arms crossed tightly. "You made a complete fool of yourself, Sebastian, and of me." "I didn't know," he said, his voice flat. It was a weak defense, and he knew it. "That's the point. You never know, you just charge ahead assuming everyone is beneath you, that you can play with people's lives for your own amusement." She seethed. "Well, your little game just went viral. The board of my father's charity is meeting tomorrow. What do you think they'll be discussing over coffee?" Sebastian didn't answer. He was watching the video again, zooming in on Celestine's face. In the pixelated image, he could see the flicker of emotions, the initial pain, the hardening resolve, the fiery passion. He had looked at her and seen a disposable object. He had been spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. The next morning, it was a full-blown media storm. The video had millions of views. It was on every morning news show, every entertainment blog. The tango waitress was the #1 trending topic in the country. Reporters were camped outside the Serafina, trying to get a comment from the now-famous staff. Dubois, looking overwhelmed, simply stated that the employee had quit the previous night and left no forwarding information. At the headquarters of Sterling Innovations, Sebastian's PR team was in full crisis mode. "We need to get ahead of this, Seb," said David Chen, his chief operating officer, and one of his few real friends. "The narrative right now is billionaire bully gets rightfully humbled. It's not a good look. It makes you look cruel and out of touch." "I was cruel," Sebastian admitted, staring out his panoramic office window at the city below. He hadn't slept. "I was an arrogant ass." David raised an eyebrow. An admission of fault from Sebastian was rarer than a solar eclipse. "Okay, good start. So what do we do?" "We issue an apology. We say the proposal was a poor attempt at humor. We make a large donation to a charity for aspiring artists." "No," Sebastian said, turning from the window. "That's not enough. That's just damage control. That's plastic." "What are you thinking?" David asked, wary. "I need to find her," Sebastian said, a new unfamiliar determination in his voice. "I need to apologize to her. In person." "Are you crazy? Leave it alone. The story will die down in a few days," David argued. "Going after her will only make it worse. It'll look like you're harassing her again, trying to buy her silence." "I don't care how it looks," Sebastian insisted. "This isn't about P anymore. Did you watch the video, David? I mean, really watch it?" "That wasn't just a dance. That was something else. No one learns to dance like that, taking a few classes on the weekend. That's a lifetime of dedication. And she was serving tables at the Serafina. Why?" The question hung in the air. It was the question that had been gnawing at him all night. The disconnect was too vast. The talent was too immense to be hidden under a waitress's apron by choice. He had set out to expose a weakness, and had instead stumbled upon a profound mystery. And Sebastian Sterling, a man who had built his empire on solving complex problems and uncovering patterns others couldn't see, was now completely and utterly obsessed. "I don't just need to apologize," he said more to himself than to David. "I need to understand." He picked up his phone and buzzed his assistant. "Get me Nicholas Frost on the line, the private investigator. Tell him to clear his schedule. I have a job for him. I want him to find a ghost." While Sebastian Sterling was leveraging his immense resources to pierce the veil of her anonymity, Celestine Rossi was hiding. She'd fled her tiny apartment, taking refuge in the slightly larger, infinitely more cluttered apartment of her best friend and former co-worker, Chloe. Chloe's living room was a fortress of drawn blinds and silenced phones. The television was off, but the story was unavoidable. Every time they dared to check online, Celestine's face, captured in a grainy screenshot from the viral video, stared back at them. "You are officially more famous than that cat who plays the piano," Chloe announced, scrolling through her phone with a morbid fascination. "They're calling you the Tango Terminatrix. The comments are wild. 90% are on your side, calling you a hero. The other 10% are just proposals from strangers who are apparently into being publicly dominated." Celestine curled on the sofa in a borrowed sweatshirt, managed a weak smile. "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I just detonated my entire life." "You didn't detonate it. You liberated it," Chloe corrected. "You quit that soul-crushing job in the most epic way possible. You should be proud." "I'm terrified, Chloe," Celestine confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I have no job. My father's next treatment is in 3 weeks, and now my face is everywhere. What if a potential employer sees that they'll think I'm a troublemaker? Or they'll think you're a superstar who deserves better than serving soup to sociopaths," Chloe countered fiercely. "Look, there are already offers. This dance studio in Chelsea wants to offer you a position as their lead instructor. A theatre company in the village wants to audition you for their new show. A cruise line wants you to be their headline performer. Izzy, this is a chance. the chance you thought you'd lost." Celestine flinched at the word chance. It brought back too many memories. The scent of rosin, the feel of a perfectly balanced dance shoe, the echo of applause in a real theater, and the face of her partner, the other half of her soul on the dance floor. Matteo. As if summoned by the thought, Chloe's phone buzzed with a new message notification. She looked at it, and her expression soured. "Speak of the devil," she muttered. "What is it?" Celestine asked. "It's him, Matteo Vargas," Chloe said, turning the phone to show Celestine the screen. It was a message request on a social media platform. The message read, "Celestine mi estrella. I saw the video. The world saw the video. That fire, it never went out. I knew it. We need to talk. I'm back in New York. Call me." Celestine felt a cold dread wash over her. Matteo, her partner since they were children. They had been a unit, a single entity destined for greatness. They had won junior championships, national titles. They were Vargas and Rossi, the rising stars of the international tango circuit. He was the one who had pushed her, perfected her, and ultimately broken her. The tragedy hadn't just been her father's sudden, devastating illness. It had been Matteo's reaction to it. When she'd told him she needed to step back to take time off from competing to care for her family and work to pay the bills, he had been furious. He'd called her weak, said she was throwing away their dream. His dream. He hadn't offered support. He'd delivered an ultimatum. The dance or her family. When she chose her family, he left. He took a new partner and moved to Europe without so much as a goodbye, leaving her to face her world, crumbling alone. His abandonment had been a deeper cut than any financial hardship. "Don't you dare answer him," Chloe warned, seeing the conflicted look on Celestine's face. "He's an opportunist, is he? He saw you go viral, and now he's slithering back, thinking he can ride your coattails." "He was my partner for 15 years, Celestine said softly. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Chloe insisted. "He left you when you needed him most. Sebastian Sterling might be a world-class jerk, but at least he's a stranger. Matteo knew you, and he still walked away." Meanwhile, in his sterile, glass-walled office, Sebastian was reading the preliminary report from his investigator, Nicholas Frost. Frost was the best in the business. Discreet, thorough, and frighteningly efficient. Subject: Celestine Maria Rossi. Age 28. Last known address: Walk-up apartment, Queens. Employment history: Waitress. The Serafina, 18 months. Prior to that, various service industry jobs. Family: Lorenzo Rossi. Father, 62. Former master carpenter. Suffered a debilitating stroke 3 years ago. Currently in long-term care at the Northwood Rehabilitation Center. Medical expenses: substantial insurance coverage minimal. Elena Rossi. Mother, deceased. Sebastian paused, a knot forming in his stomach. The mystery of why she was a waitress was beginning to resolve itself into a sad, simple story of financial desperation. But it was the next section that made him lean forward. Education/training. Full scholarship recipient, Astor Academy of the Performing Arts, AAPA. Dance. Major. Specialized in Argentinian tango. Attended from age 10 to 22. Considered a prodigy. Competitive history. Paired with Matteo Vargas. 3x U.S. National Junior Tango Champion. 2x North American Professional Exhibition Champion, Gold Medalist 2018 World Tango. Championships Buenos Aires show tango division attached was a photo. It showed a younger Celestine, maybe 21 or 22, standing on a podium. Her face was radiant, flushed with victory. A heavy gold medal hung around her neck. Her arm was around a handsome, smirking young man, Mateo Vargas. They looked invincible. Note: Subject Rossi and partner Vargas abruptly dissolved their partnership 3 years ago, shortly after her father's medical incident. Vargas relocated to Europe with a new partner. Rossi dropped off the professional dance circuit entirely. No public performance is on record until the incident at the Serafina. Sebastian stared at the photo. The brilliant, joyful woman on that podium and the haunted, weary waitress he had tormented were the same person. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture not of a mystery, but of a tragedy. He had mocked a champion who had sacrificed her crown for her family. He had belittled a woman who had given up everything, and his careless cruelty had dragged her back into a spotlight she had clearly fled for a reason. His guilt, which had been a nagging discomfort, now became a crushing weight. His obsession with finding her was no longer about curiosity. It was about atonement. He picked up the file and looked at the address for the Northwood Rehabilitation Center. An idea began to form in his mind, an idea that went beyond a simple apology. An idea that was risky, that could be seen as intrusive, but that felt like the only right thing to do. He couldn't undo the humiliation he had caused, but maybe, just maybe, he could help restore the life she had been forced to leave behind. The Northwood Rehabilitation Center was a world away from the gleaming towers of Manhattan. It was a clean, quiet place, but it smelled of disinfectant and quiet desperation. Sebastian Sterling, dressed down in jeans and a simple grey sweater, felt profoundly out of place. He wasn't here as a mogul or a public figure. He was here as a man carrying a heavy debt of conscience. He had arranged the meeting through the center's administrator under the guise of being a potential philanthropic donor. In the small, sunlit recreation room, he found Lorenzo Rossi, sitting in a wheelchair, painstakingly trying to carve a small piece of wood with a specially adapted tool. He was a man with a kind, tired face and the powerful, gnarled hands of a craftsman, one of which was now mostly immobile. "Mr. Rossi." Sebastian began, his voice softer than usual. Lorenzo looked up, his eyes sharp and intelligent, despite his physical limitations. "You are the man from the television," he said, his speech slow but clear. "The one who made my Bella dance." Sebastian flinched. He hadn't expected to be recognized. "Yes. My name is Sebastian Sterling. I came here to—" "I know why you are here," Lorenzo interrupted. He set down his carving. "You feel guilty. You want to give us money to make it go away." The bluntness of the statement disarmed Sebastian completely. He had come with a carefully prepared speech, an offer to cover all of Lorenzo's past, present, and future medical expenses anonymously, if preferred. But Lorenzo had cut right through the pretense. "Yes," Sebastian admitted honestly. "I do feel guilty. What I did was inexcusable. And yes, I want to help. Your daughter, she shouldn't have to carry this burden." Lorenzo looked at his hands. "The burden is not the bills, Mr. Sterling. The burden is seeing the light go out of her eyes. For 3 years she has not been my Bella. She has been a ghost. She gave up her life, her soul, the dance for me. Every dollar she earns feels like a piece of her dream she has sold." He finally met Sebastian's gaze, and his eyes were filled with a father's fierce, heartbreaking love. "When I saw that video, for 3 minutes my Bella came back. The fire was there. You were cruel to her, yes, but you also woke her up. A strange gift from a terrible man." The words hit Sebastian harder than any insult. A terrible man. "I want to fix what I broke, Sebastian said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. Please, let me do this. Not for my conscience. For her. He slid an envelope across the table. It wasn't a check. It was a detailed proposal from the best neurological and physical therapy specialists in the country, a fully funded multi-year treatment plan, and a deed transferring ownership of a small, accessible house near the facility to the Rossi family, free and clear. It was a comprehensive, life-altering solution, not a simple payoff. Lorenzo looked at the papers, his eyes widening slightly. He was silent for a long time. This is not money, he said finally. This is a future. He looked up at Sebastian. She will not accept this from you. Her pride is all she has left. Then don't tell her it's from me, Sebastian pleaded. Tell her it's a new grant program, an anonymous benefactor. Anything. Just let her be free to dance again. At that exact moment across town, Celestine was facing a ghost of her own. She had agreed to meet Matteo against Chloe's advice in a neutral location, a small coffee shop in her neighborhood. He looked different, older, harder. The easy charm had been replaced by a slick European polish. Celestine, he said, his voice a smooth baritone she had once found intoxicating. You look tired. I've been working, Matteo, she replied coolly. Exactly. Working. Serving coffee. It's a crime, he said, leaning forward. I saw the video. That passion. It's still there. It's ours. We were destined for greatness, you and I. I was a fool to leave. You didn't leave. You abandoned me, she corrected him, her voice steely. I was angry. Hurt you gave up on us, he argued, but this is our second chance. A gift from the gods of social media. Vargas and Rossi can be a global brand now. That idiot billionaire did us a favor. We can tour, teach judge competitions. We can have it all back, mi estrella. He reached across the table to take her hand, but she pulled it away. For years she had nursed the wound of his departure, sometimes even blaming herself. But seeing him now so eager to capitalize on her viral moment, she saw him clearly for the first time. He didn't love the dance. He loved the glory. He didn't miss her. He missed her talent. There is no us, Matteo, she said, her voice firm. That partnership is dead. You killed it when you walked away from me and my family. Don't be a fool, Celestine. He hissed, his charm evaporating. This is your only way back. No one else will have you. You've been out of the game for too long. You need me. No, she said, standing up, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. I don't. I never did. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him stunned and furious. She had faced her past and had not flinched. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a flicker of her old self returning, not because of a dance, but because of a choice she had made for herself. Her liberation, however, was about to be complicated. As she returned to Chloe's apartment, her phone rang. It was Victoria Davenport. Celestine Rossi. The voice was cold and clipped. I think you and I need to have a conversation. It seems you've made quite an impression on my fiancé. Meet me at the plaza in an hour. Don't be late. The line went dead. Sebastian, meanwhile, was also facing an ultimatum. He returned to his penthouse to find Victoria waiting for him, her face like a thundercloud. My father called me, she said, her voice dangerously calm. He heard from the board of the Northwood Center that a Mr. Sterling was making inquiries. You went to see that waitress's father. It wasn't a question. Victoria, I had to. You had to what? Involve yourself further in this disgusting, humiliating mess, she exploded. It's all anyone is talking about. I have become a laughing stock. The woman whose fiancé was so captivated by a waitress's tango, he's now chasing her family around. This has nothing to do with you, Sebastian said flatly. This is about something I did. Something I'm trying to make right. Make right? She laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. Oh, Sebastian, you are so naive sometimes. You don't make things right with people like that. You write a check and you move on. You've lost your perspective. She walked toward him, her eyes hard as diamonds. So I'm going to make this very simple for you. You will cease all contact with this woman and her family. You will let your PR team handle it. You will go back to being the man I agreed to marry. All this engagement and the merger of the Sterling and Davenport empires that comes with it is over. Choose, her or me. Sebastian looked at her perfect hair, her flawless makeup, her cold, calculating eyes. He saw the world he had fought so hard to conquer, the acceptance he had craved. And then he thought of Celestine's fiery dance and her father's quiet dignity. He thought of the sacrifice, the passion, the authenticity. One world was built on power and appearances. The other was built on something real. His choice, he realized with shocking clarity, had already been made. The Palm Court at the Plaza Hotel was a monument to gilded elegance, a place designed to make anyone in a borrowed sweatshirt feel small. Celestine walked in her head held high. After her encounters with Matteo and her father's indirect awakening, her fear had been replaced by a quiet, resolute strength. Victoria was sitting at a secluded table, a picture of icy perfection. She didn't offer a greeting, simply gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Thank you for coming." Victoria began, her tone suggesting it was a royal summons. "I'll be direct. You've become an inconvenience." "I didn't ask for any of this," Celestine replied calmly. "And yet here we are." Victoria continued, stirring a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. "Sebastian is impressionable. He has this misguided notion that he needs to atone for his behavior. He's sentimental, a flaw I am trying to correct. He seems to have developed a fixation on you." She slid a checkbook and a pen across the table. "So let's solve this. Write a number on this check. Any number. 6 figures, 7. Whatever it takes for you to disappear. Take a long vacation. Move to a new city. Go back to whatever life you had before you decided to ruin my evening." Celestine looked at the blank check, then back at Victoria's perfectly composed face. A week ago, a check like that would have been the answer to all her prayers. It would have meant her father's care, a life without constant crushing financial anxiety. But now it felt like an insult. Lorenzo's words echoed in her head. "The burden is not the bills." Slowly, Celestine pushed the checkbook back across the table. "My dignity isn't for sale, Miss Davenport," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "And for the record, your fiancé's behavior ruined my life long before it ruined your evening." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "You self-righteous little—" "I'm leaving," Celestine said, standing up. "I have nothing more to say to you." As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Sebastian, who had just entered the Palm Court, his face grim. He had come looking for Victoria to end their engagement, only to find her attempting to buy Celestine's silence. "Victoria, that's enough," he said, his voice sharp with command. His eyes found Celestine's, and for the first time she saw not arrogance or pity but genuine, profound remorse. "Celestine, I am so sorry. For everything. Your apology is about 3 days and 1,000,000 YouTube views too late, she said, though the anger in her voice was tempered by a weary sadness. I know, he said. Words are useless. That's why I went to see your father. Celestine's blood ran cold. You what? How dare you bring him into this? I had to, Sebastian insisted, stepping closer. I had to understand, and I had to do something real, not just for me, for him, for you. Before she could protest further, Celestine's phone rang. It was the administrator from her father's care center, her voice bubbling with excitement. Celestine. You won't believe it. An anonymous arts foundation just awarded your father their first ever legacy grant. It covers everything, all his outstanding bills, a full intensive therapy program with the best specialists, and they've even arranged for a trust to cover his living expenses. He can finally leave Northwood. He's free. Celestine. You're free. Celestine listened, stunned into silence. The phone pressed hard against her ear. She looked at Sebastian, understanding dawning on her face. It wasn't a payoff. It wasn't a bribe. It was a key to the cage she had been in for 3 long years. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness or anger, but of overwhelming, complicated relief. Victoria, seeing the entire exchange, stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. I see, she said icily to Sebastian. You've made your choice. You'd rather throw your fortune away on this charity case than build an empire with me. You are a fool, Sebastian. No, Sebastian said, his eyes never leaving Celestine's tear-streaked face. For the first time in a very long time, I'm not. The Victoria stormed out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shattered ambitions in her wake. An awkward, heavy silence fell between Celestine and Sebastian. The grand setting of the plaza seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them. You shouldn't have, Celestine whispered, finally finding her voice. Yes, I should have, he countered gently. It's the only thing I've done in the past week that I'm not ashamed of. I can't take back what I did, how I treated you. But I can give you back the time you sacrificed. I can give you back the chance to just be a dancer. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for a date. He didn't make another ridiculous proposal. He simply stood there, offering her a future with no strings attached. A few weeks later, Celestine stood in a vast, sun-drenched dance studio. She wasn't an instructor. She was the owner. The Rossi Foundation for the Performing Arts, funded by an anonymous tech grant, had been established to provide scholarships and opportunities for young dancers from low-income families. Her father, now in a state-of-the-art outpatient program, spent his afternoons in a workshop attached to the studio carving beautiful wooden trophies for the foundation's future competitions. The door opened, and Sebastian walked in, looking hesitant. He hadn't contacted her since that day at the plaza, giving her space. The place looks amazing, he said quietly. Thank you, for all of it, she replied, her sincerity clear. I don't know how to repay you. I do, he said, a hopeful, nervous energy about him. Don't repay me. Teach me. She looked at him confused. Teach you what? How to dance, he said, his gaze direct and stripped of all its former arrogance. Properly, this time. Not the showpiece. Not the performance. I don't want to learn the tango you dance for an audience. I want to learn the one you dance for yourself. I want to learn your language. It was the most honest, humble thing he had ever said. It wasn't a challenge or a proposition. It was a request for connection. Celestine looked at this man, who had in the course of a few weeks been her tormentor, her unwilling partner, and her unlikely liberator. She saw the change in him, the hard edges softened by a newfound humility. A slow smile spread across her face. She walked to the sound system and put on a piece of music. It wasn't the fiery, dramatic La Comparsita. It was a slow, melodic tango, full of quiet longing and the promise of a new beginning. She turned and held out her hand. "The first lesson is free," she said, "but this time, Mr. Sterling, you follow my lead." He took her hand, and as they stepped onto the polished floor, it wasn't a battle or a performance. It was a conversation, a quiet, unrehearsed duet between two people from different worlds, finding a new rhythm together. And so a story that began with a cruel taunt ended with a quiet lesson. It wasn't a fairy tale wedding, but something far more real, a partnership built not on a mocking proposal, but on a genuine plea for understanding. Sebastian and Celestine's journey shows us that true strength isn't about power or wealth, but about the courage to admit when you're wrong and the grace to forgive. It reminds us that dignity is not for sale, and that incredible talent can be found in the most unexpected places, just waiting for the right music to play. What did you think of Celestine's incredible comeback? Was Sebastian's grand gesture enough to atone for his actions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you were moved by this story of redemption and unexpected connection, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales that will touch your heart. Thank you for listening.